Yes. Welcome, everyone, to the Trillizum Show. I am your co-host, your moderator, your producer, unbiased favoritism. And allow me to introduce your host, Trilla OG.
What's going on, y'all? What's going on, y'all? You got a bad echo going on, and you're late. Really bad.
I got an echo going on?
Yes, sir.
Interesting. Not sure why I have an echo.
I don't know. It might not be. It might be me.
Make sure the screen not loaded on two screens.
It might be me, sir. Well, welcome to the Trillizum Show. Let's battle through this technical difficulty real quick. I think we just solved it. But I appreciate everybody jumping in, hollering at the boy Trilogy. This is the Trillizum Show. Today we're gonna talk about some American history.
Now listening to the sultry sounds of Trilogy Productions.
Versus just cooking on this beat, though. First cooking on this beat.
It's all you, brother.
Shout out to me. In a previous life, I would say not too long ago, I was a beat maker. I'm still a beat maker, just haven't had the clientele that I need to be continuing that pathway. But it is July 14th, Trillizum Show number 2. And like I said in the first one, we're going to talk about some things, but I think we need to lay down some runway, some railroad. And I appreciate everybody joining on TikTok. It's stick around. I'm trying to get people to hop on this podcast with me and to talk about things that might come in an episode or two. But I definitely want to introduce myself. So follow me. See what I'm doing, see what I'm about. And I'm sure that if you're a level-headed individual that wants to talk about some things, we can do that. I'll pull you up here. We can talk about stuff. But today, we're just going to talk about a little American history. And if you know anything about American history, I'd like to hear what you got to say. So with that being said, let's see. Thank you. I got to do it a little like the comedian Spurt. I got to do it like all right, kill the beat.
No, I had you. I was letting you do intro. I knew you. I had you.
Do it like
add me on TikTok. I requested.
Okay, hold on. Let me do that real quick. Let me get my producer up here. All righty. Unbiased favoritism. How you doing today, sir?
Great.
Okay.
Great.
I don't know what just happened to this, but we're no longer on the live feed.
Oh, my bad. You probably just need to turn down your phone.
Okay, I can do that. I'm not trying. Yeah, so that's cool. All right, boom. So, alrighty. Trillizum Show. We are live on TikTok. We are live on YouTube. Please follow us there. But anyway, American history. I'm going to talk about why the English or the British decided to come over to the United States. Some may speculate there's a lot of different reasons why they knew about vast resources and things of that nature. I don't think so. I don't know if they really knew about that at first. When they originally started colonizing, but there was a lot of wars and conflicts, and it was over, I would say, political and religious stances. Okay. I think that's a little bit more of a background than what, you just wanted to run away from the queen. from what it reads in the history books, from what I could research, and this is coming straight from National Geographic, I think is a non-political or a non-biased source of information as far as history. I think that they're biased. So with that being said, um, coming from that source, they're saying that Europe was into it because they wanted what the Spanish and the French had going on. Uh, that's a power grab. We could talk about freedoms and liberties and the pursuit of happiness and stuff like that, but there was definitely a dark reason why England wanted to come over here. And with that being said, there was a religious aspect to that as well, because I believe England at the time, or British, the Britannia was a Protestant. They weren't Christian, and I believe that that was another situation where they wanted to come over and convert these people to Protestant and stuff like that. So we already got the cards stacked up against us, and we ain't even touched on the impact that this would have on indigenous um, people in America, or the people that have already settled here or that were in control of certain things, or power grabbing certain things, such as the Spanish and the French. So there is a little bit of a history that a lot of people don't acknowledge, I believe. And that road, that pathway, that runway, as I would like to call it, um, would suggest that there was a lot of things going on here before the colonization of England and the Queen and all of that stuff, and what we know today, George Washington, and and all those people. So like, I want to go into that. So according to National Geographic, Europe's period of exploration and colonization was fueled largely by necessity. They didn't have any resources over there. Europeans had to become accustomed to the goods from Asia, such as silk, spices, and potteries that had for centuries traveled by the Silk Road. All right. So by the middle of the 16th century, trade was under threat. There was a rise in power in the Ottoman and Turks. So we're talking there was a little situation happening over there in the Middle East, going into China, that part of Asia. Um, the Mongolian nation was starting to uh, rise in power and cut that stuff off. They were shutting them down. So they were kind of, there was a need to find some sort of resource, and they saw um, that there may have been a exit strategy from that need from Chinese export. Thanks to everybody that's joining live on TikTok, on Facebook, and on um, YouTube. I
YouTube.
appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So in around 1419, we know about Columbus, coming over and finding things and all of that. But it could be argued that Columbus didn't land on what we know as the original colonies. We could kind of argue that some at another point in time, but we'll just say that the land is somewhere on this side of the ocean, hit somewhere on the east coast of what we know as the greater part of America. So we'll speculate on where that was. That's not We're not trying to debate that. So around that time frame, there's some land over here. So it took some time for those guys to be able to staff up, and that, I mean, it took hundreds of years for that to, at least hundreds of years, because in 1600s is when um, they heavily started coming over, and getting things colonized. So Spain was over here. So let's talk about them. Spain was driven by three main motives. Columbus and his voyage sought fame and fortune, as did his Spanish sponsor. So at towards the end of this, in about 1565, St. Augustine, Florida, was established around that time. and it was a trade exporting, you know, and at that point in time, we're talking about slavery. This is a port of trade. Everything from the east, everything from the Indies, everything from the Mediterranean, from Africa, everything came through the port of Florida. So we're already establishing that the South, as far as the early stages of America or the United States, was a key component of this country. So if there's a disagreement on that, we could talk about that too. But I would say that Florida was the Ellis Island, so to speak, of that time, with being a focal point in trade. So of course, American slavery and slavery in the Caribbean is underway. The Spanish had already conquered Mexico, the lands that we know as Mexico, and was already into places like California and New Mexico and Arizona and those Utah and all of these places that we you know sometimes think wasn't inhabited by settlers or people that weren't indigenous. That's not a that's not a fact. Elizabeth Jojo, you're watching. You said no. I'm not sure what I said. But if anything, if I said anything, I just happened to see you say no. So if there was something that I said or something that I said that wasn't factual, if you want to correct me, that's fine. We'll address it. But at that point in time, so the conquistadors were already running through Central and South America and running up the west coast of what we know today as North America. So that was already happening. So what England and those people saw, was a heavy Christianity following. They believed in Christ, and at that point in time, it was a Protestant belief in England, and they wanted to come over and teach them about that religion. So, needless to say, the Central America has always been Central and South and regions in Mexico have always been very fruitful as far as resources, precious metals, uh, exotic and very useful crops. We have a lot of things that come out of Central and South America that make a lot of money, that are very lucrative for those countries. Um, but at the end of the day, somebody was over there conquering it. There was slavery happening in those parts of the world at that time. It was just the way of the world, unfortunately. So it would take about another 70 years up in the 1598, I believe, where the Spanish were finishing up their expedition of the Southwest for gold, which everybody we talk about the 49ers and all of that stuff. That 70 years before that, Spanish were already up in there, Mission Bay, San Diego, and parts of California that we sometimes forget was already occupied by someone other than indigenous people. So let that one sink in. All right. So the main mission was to convert the Indians to Christianity. Was the mission. So they're sending people over, trying to convert these people into Christianity. Let's move into, taking some of these resources back to England. There's a lot of gold and then other resources, wood, all that stuff. So they were over here basically harvesting this area, this land, and then sending it back to England. Uh, we'll back up a little bit, and people don't might not know how Canada came to be, but it was French. I mean, a lot of people um, probably can assume that. So in France in 1530 something, France claimed Canada. and they just been up there ever since. So all of that land is owned by Canada, and in the early 1600s, you know, Quebec was established as that capital. So there's a lot of things happening in this country before 1776. That's what I'm building up to. That's what I'm building up to. So a lot of people think that this land was just barren and just full of Indians or Native Americans, and then England came over here and just did a bunch of crazy things. That's they've been dealing with it since before 1492, and this is the country that we live in. So there's a lot of things that we don't know about our country, and I was shocked to find out some of these things myself. You know what I'm saying? So our first English occupation of anything in the United States was in 1606, I think 1606, um, and that
That's a
was
good year. It was a good year. I remember that year.
1606. And that was, yep, because that's VA. That VA was established. Virginia was established. It was King James, and they established Virginia. They colonized
Good brother.
Virginia.
Yeah, good brother. King James, good brother.
All right.
Yeah, good brother, man.
Are you being sarcastic? I hope you're
Yeah,
being sarcastic.
I'm just adding a little. I'm just adding a little humor.
Un-
I'm just
okay,
adding a little humor.
UF. I hope that was the joke. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll talk about that. We could talk about that too. But Jamestown was established, the first colony, the first little city, the first little settlement. So that's a lot of time for things to be happening in this country, things to be kind of established. We've already said that back in the 1500s, the late 1400s, that Florida was already a pinnacle of trade. Of course, my dog will bark at anything. But
Co-host.
Florida was already a pinnacle of trade. So we're already knowing that slavery is happening well before English colonization. We have to know this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And that's, I think, is a big thing that a lot of people don't understand and know, or want to even comprehend, or just might not even just know. Like it's not common knowledge. A lot of people just think, Christopher Columbus came over here, and then some other people showed up a couple of years later, and then there was a bunch of English people just running through from the East Coast to the West Coast. That's not how it happened. So that's kind of the introduction to Britain, as far as British uh, monarch, that imperial presence hit the United States for a permanent situation. Okay. In 1620, settlers left Plymouth Rock, went back to English, and then came back to join the settlers in Jamestown. So they left from up north and then went to where it was popping, so to speak. A lot of them were separatists from the English rule. So a lot of this stuff. If you're a Star Wars fan, this kind of makes sense. There were separatists from people. They were trying to defect from the church, but then this Christianity thing, and it was very confusing for a lot of people. Back then it was a very and now they're being introduced to indigenous people that believe in spirits and wind gods and water gods and Mother Earth. So it was a very confusing time religiously, a very divisive time religiously in this country. Probably um, probably to the same likes as when the Muslim um, religion was becoming real prevalent and introduced into American culture. I would probably equivocate to that. Um, they believed that the New World had opportunity for them. So they gathered up in Jamestown, and then they started pretty much expanding across the East Coast up and down. Uh, we talk about Thanksgiving and all that stuff. That we can argue about if that even happened or not, what deals were made and all of that stuff. They have all of these these stories about that type of stuff, but we already know that um, there was definite bad times between the indigenous, uh, the Indians and the English settlers, the Dutch settlers, and the Spanish settlers and French settlers. You have to understand that these indigenous people lasted almost 200 years without being overtaken or overrun or outpowered by any of these settlers from 1400 something to 1600 something. The indigenous people ruled their lands. I mean, there was parts that people were infringing on. There was battles and skirmishes that left those settlers messed up, and they had to move down the lake a little bit because these people weren't letting go of that piece of land. That's what happened. I don't think a lot of people understand how powerful those Indian nations were. There were negotiations, furious negotiations with the Queen, with the French Parliament, or whatever the leadership was over there, with these indigenous tribal members and tribal leaders. They were respected and feared in most cases. A lot of people think that the poor, inferior, indigenous people, and if I hope that I'm not offending anyone. In fact, I hope that I'm bigging up the indigenous people to let them know that it took a minute for them to be overthrown and for all their land to be taken from them. They had to get whittled down, and then the introduction to guns is what did them in. If they were still fighting sword to arrow and whatever the rudimentary weapons were when the colonies first got started, uh, there would still be a problem. There would still be a problem if that wasn't the invention of guns. So I think the Indians' downfall was that they showed the New World tobacco. We talk about the peace pipe and all of that stuff. Who knows? I mean, that's speculate. Some people think that they're talking about, uh, medicinal green. And I gotta remember I'm on TikTok. I can't say certain things. Um, you know, and I tobacco was introduced to these North American colonies, and then that was it. And then that's when the slaughter happened because they sent a little bit of that back to England, and it was like that ooh for them. It was like that boogie. You know what I'm saying? They got ooh, what's this? And and it was a wrap. And that's when I would say we had our defining moment as a nation. 1776. We got away from England and all of that. Okay, cool. You know, that's fine. But the American Revolutionary War and the Civil War were, I think, not nearly equally impactful. Like I think that eventually we would have just shut England down, regardless if the Confederacy when they wasn't trying to send nothing back to England. You know what I'm saying? I think that was one of their biggest fears, to be honest with you. Um, so it's really about the control of these products. I would categorize them as like poppies or cocoa or whatever that is now that's super legal. You know why? Because they know that it's a powerful thing and it can't be controlled. So they make it illegal now. And then, the governments learn how to control tobacco and all that stuff. There's a lot of resources out here, a lot of fish and rivers and streams and untapped lakes and all of that stuff that um, could be salted down and distributed across the world. You know, things that people never seen before, like trout, you know what I'm saying? Salmon, mid Atlantic salmon, and salmon from, the Northeast. These are there was a lot of things happening before this country decided to um, settle over here from the early 1600s to 1776. So these I just want to take the time to lay some railroad, a little bit of history behind this. And I'm not going to be on this episode is not going to be that long, but I definitely wanted to talk about that part of our American history. This wasn't some undiscovered land. People were here when the English got over here. The Indians were not some weak nation. They held it down for almost 200 years against multiple nations until the invention of guns, which I know we're going to talk about on this podcast a couple of times.
Facts. Guns change everything. Changed everything.
And they always do. And you always gotta, they're here now. There's no getting rid of them. So I'll just leave it at that. But we can have this discussion. We can have this discussion on TikTok, wherever we need to have it. But tune in. I hope that you guys, got a few more minutes here. So what I'm gonna do is wrap this thing up. We learned about the period of time from 1400 to 17. Excuse me. I mean, well, not the 1400 to 1600s, and then obviously we'll talk about the Revolutionary and Civil War a little bit, probably next podcast to lay that down, and then the next podcast after that we'll bring it to current events as far as the conception of how our political system was structured and how everything was signed and why they were signed and what was the motive at the time, what was the deal. You know, a lot of this stuff is going to shock you. I'm telling you, if you don't have an open mind and you're steadfast on what you think this country's built on, you might want to take a listen to me. And if you think that I'm off base, I'm more than willing to once we have my first couple of podcasts, I'm more than willing to bring you on the show, have you call in. We'll talk about everything as long as we're respectful. I want to get this word out. I want to make sure that everybody is voting for things that make sense and matter to them in a sense that it's not emotional. That's gonna always be my theme is we got to take the emotion out of some things and understand that everybody has feelings that are different. But if we're dealing with everybody as a whole and everybody has different emotions, but the majority of people care about a large majority of certain things, then that's what we need to focus on and not really focus on the emotional stuff. And there's certain parties, and like I said before, and I'm gonna stand my flag on it. I'm not a big fan of the Democratic Party. And I think around episode 3 or 4, we'll talk about why. So VA was
It's
the
okay, man. You can call me V verse. That's
VA
fine.
VA verse. All right. So what would you and then we're about to wrap this up, but what
Mhm.
what was your takeaway from what that monologue was for
Um,
the Senate?
takeaway was pretty much everything that you said was kind of along the lines of what I learned. I was born and raised in Virginia, so I'm pretty sure um my state, if there is some type of discrepancy in how much they're taught the American history. I'm pretty sure my state is up there with the higher states that taught it for sure. But especially like the beginning because it was prevalent to to that state particularly the beginning. So yeah, I would say
Right.
everything that you said just kind of hit on, and I
There's a
definitely
lot of major American turning stones, milestones that happened in that state in various
absolutely
times during the progression of what we know to be the United States of America.
absolutely
Seriously. Um, Shout out to Virginia. Uh, Virginia, I happen to know is one of the heaviest defended states in the nation with all the military that's
all the
out there.
military bases and the shipyard. Yeah,
Shout out to all the women, men and women that are serving our nation. I will always do that. I will always tip
absolutely.
my cap to you for answering that call. I appreciate you for doing that. And there's a lot of people in Virginia doing that right there. So shout out to you guys. But so you're saying basically you didn't learn too much from this today.
Not myself, but hopefully the
Nah,
listeners
because
will.
you yeah, no, and that's cool. Well, aside from Virginia, did you know how this nation, how this part of the land mass was already inhabited by settlers and conquerors and things
Yeah,
of other
yeah,
indigenous?
yeah. Let me correct. There was a couple of things that definitely I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, especially the beginning of what you taught about, before America, but just the British and England and stuff like that, where things kind of jumped off, or where the 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 idea of America kind of
Right.
sparked for
It
sure.
wasn't really like this. It was a small part of them wanting to leave this monarchy and stuff like that. Where they wanted to leave the monarchy was once they were already established over here and they were getting taxed to hell, and
Hmm.
they are sending all the resources back over there, and they was living in dang near, you know, for lack of a better term, pissing shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything they had to send back over there to the queen. So that was later in American history, more closer to the 1700s than the 1400s and stuff like that, where they still had a huge loyalty to that crown, right? So before even that, there were people here fighting these Indians, taking their land, doing all of that. I think that I didn't realize that, honestly. That was a thing. Hold on. I knew the Indians were here, and I knew that
Mm.
the Spanish were excellent explorers, and they it shows you the Spanish language is in almost every part of the world as a second language.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like almost every part of the world, everybody knows how to speak Spanish or Latin or something like that. And then, so you already know they were exploring lands. They have all of South America that speaks predominantly Spanish. I think there's one French speaking South American country, and everything else speaks Spanish.
Mm.
So, we fail to remember that the Mexican people, who were the indigenous people of that area, were conquered by the Spanish and dealt with
Mm.
slavery and dealt with those things because it was the way of the world. And we're going to get into those conversations. So, unbiased favoritism. You got anything else? Where can they find us?
You can contact us at any, well, while we're live, not at any point in time, on that number. If you call it outside of pod hours, you'll probably get ignored. But at any
Leave a
time you can
message.
go
Leave a
ahead
message.
at
Leave a
any time
message.
you can go ahead and email us at trillism@gmail.com. Also you can find Trill on TikTok at TikTok Triller. You can find us streaming all of our shows on YouTube on the Guap Network, on Twitch on the Guap Network, and on Facebook on the Guap Network, and also on Trilogy's Facebook page as well. Other than that, man, yeah, you can find us here Friday nights or Friday evenings, depending on where you're watching from. And yeah, you can also, I'm sorry, that's the live portion of it, but you can also find us on streaming on all platforms, all podcast platforms. Not at this very moment, but by the time this touches your ears, hopefully everything will be set in stone. But for now, Spotify, we are on Spotify podcasts. Trillizum, the Trillizum Show. Look it up, hit play, and let us know what you think. You can comment on there, which is pretty dope. Pretty dope.
So I appreciate everyone that tuned in to the live. If that was how you caught this, and like Verse said, for you guys listening, I appreciate you. Please hit the follow or subscribe button. Till next time, Trillizum out.
Show. Sultry sounds of Trillizum.